Hey guys, this is Miss Morrison, your math teacher for Business Math 2. First off, in 5.1, we have to go over some old algebra, how to factor, because we use that a couple of times in the rest of this section. Okay, so when we say factor something, factor means break it into the things that multiply up. So like say we had the number 6, the factors are maybe 2 and 3, because 2 times 3 equals 6. So 2 and 3 are called factors. So we're gonna do the same thing, only instead of just having a number, we're gonna have some letters. So we're going to try and come up with 2 sets of something that multiply up to these 3 problems. Okay, so first we ask ourselves, do you have a GCF? So let's look at this first example. If I look at my big numbers, I see a 2 and a 2. Hey, so that's definitely my GCF. Yeah. Okay, we'll have a different, kind of more difficult GCF over on this right sucker, so don't worry. Okay, it says, use the highest exponent of the variable in common. Well, there's no letter in common between these two. They're different. So we're done with step 1. Step 2 says factor out the GCF. It says write it down, then put an open set of parentheses beside it. Okay, 2 is my GCF, then write an open set of parentheses beside it. Ask yourself, what can I put in these parentheses that will multiply with my GCF to get the problem I started with? So what can I put up in here, that when I multiply it with a 2, I get 2d squared. Well, there's already a 2, so all I need is a d squared. So if I put d squared right here, 2 times d squared is 2d squared, and heck yes, that's what we started with. Now let's look at this f sucker. If I ask myself what multiplies with this 2 on the outside to give me negative 2f squared, it's definitely an f squared, but it's a negative because there's negative right there. Okay, so we just did step 1, step 2. Step 3 says, what's left inside the parentheses? Is it a difference of squares or a trinomial? Well, there's 2 terms. There's a minus sign. So this sucker is a difference because of the minus sign. It's a binomial because there's 2 terms on the inside of the parentheses. And it's called a difference of squares because, hello, tiny 2s in the air. Okay, and then a difference of squares breaks into 2 of the same looking things multiplied to each other, but one with a plus and one with a minus. So what multiplies with what to give you d squared? Well, a d and a d. What multiplies to get you f squared? An f and a f. But with differences of squares, one has a plus and one has a minus. So if I were to multiply this out, it should give me what's in the parentheses. D times d, d squared. D times negative f is negative df. F times d is a positive fd. The alphabet tells us to put it in order of df, so df. And then lastly, if I multiply f times f, that makes f squared. Hey! And then these 2 suckers, the df's, they cancel out. So since when I multiply this, I get the original, or I get this difference of 2 squares, I'm done factoring. The only thing is, let me pull down this 2 in front. So we're gonna have the GCF 2, then parentheses d plus f, d minus f. And if those aren't good enough examples, it's okay. We have more on the next couple pages. Okay, let's look at this sucker. It says b squared minus 40 minus 6b. Well, first we ask, is there something in common? So, is there a letter in common? It looks like I have a b, but not on this 40. So I'm not gonna put a letter on my GCF because there's not the same letter on everything. Okay, let's see if there's a big fat number I can divide by. You might think, oh, you can divide everything by 2. because of this 40 and this 6, but there's a pretend 1 on this b squared. So you cannot say your GCF is 2. So since there's no common letter, there's no common number that can divide into both of these, there's no GCF. So before we go to the next step, let's put this in order because it's kind of backwards. The squared always comes first, but then the naked number usually goes at the end. So I'm going to put that minus 40 just on the back end and put that minus 6b in the middle. If we don't do that, we probably won't factor right. Okay, so let's look. The first step was, do you have a GCF? No. Second step, factor out the GCF. No. Third step, what do you have left? Is it a difference of squares? No, because not all these have squares. It's a trinomial, and it has a leading coefficient of 1. So when we have a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1, we have to figure out what two numbers multiply to a 40, but add to this negative 6. Well, let's try it. What things multiply to a 40? 1 and negative 40, negative 1 and 40, 2 and negative 20, negative 2 and 20, and you can do all this in your head. You don't have to write all these numbers down. I'm just doing it for the sake of the video. So 4 and negative 10, negative 4 and 10, and I think, did I miss something? Maybe an 8, 8 and negative 5 and negative 8 and positive 5. Okay, I think all these are all the pairs that multiply up to a negative 40, but they have to add to a negative 6. So let's see the suckers that, let's see which one of these will add to something close to a 6. Well, not the 1 in the 40, that will never add to a 6. Not the 2 in the 20, that will never add to a 6. Maybe this 4 and negative 10, but we have to add to a negative 6. So the pair that works is this 4 and negative 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw two sets of parentheses, and this 4 and negative 10 are going to go at the back end. Plus 4, minus 10. And then the letter we started with was, we were dealing with B's. So we're going to put B's at the front. And then to check and see if this is right, we can multiply it all out. And if you multiply it all out, you should get the original. Okay, let's look at this last one. First, we're going to try and find the GCF. So, what numbers can divide into this 24, 38, and 42? I think all of those are even. So I'm going to say the GCF could definitely be, sorry, I can't find a pin that works. Okay. Nope, that one's gone too. Okay, so there we go. Okay, GCF. Okay, so I can definitely divide all these by 2. I don't think I can divide, yes, you can divide 38 by 2, but let's see if we can divide by anything else. Maybe a 4, 9, 20, no. I don't think we can divide by anything else because that 38 is kind of awkward. Okay, so we can definitely divide by 2. And then I see a common letter in everything. So I'm going to put that letter, X. And it says use the highest exponent. Oh gosh, this was supposed to say use the lowest exponent of the variable in common. So since X is in common, I need to use the lowest exponent, which is a pretend 1. So I'm just going to leave it as 2x because that's to the pretend 1. Okay, now let's write down that GCF, open a parentheses, and write down what's left over when you divide by 2x. Or if you want to think backwards, you can ask yourself, what multiplies with this 2x to get me the original? Well, let's see. 2 times what gives you 24? A 12. 2 times what gives you 38? A 19. 2 times what gives you 42? A 21. Okay, so we got our numbers good. Now let's worry about our letters. And remember that when you multiply, your exponents add up. So on the outside, we have a 2x to the 1. So x to the 1 multiplied with what gives you x to the 3? Well, the exponents have to add up, so I'm going to put an x squared. Okay, then that 38 was positive, okay. X to the 1 multiplies with what to give you x to the 2 on that 38? Well, another x to the 1. And then 2x times what gives you negative 42x? Negative 21. And I don't have to put an x on that end because there's already an x on the GCF. Okay, done with factoring. Woo, that took forever.